we're going to go through some things that we've been seeing. Certainly would love discussion, whether that's while we're talking or after. There was lots of little rooms and places to poke around here if you have time when we're done to go look. I think just to my right is a kind of a cool pool area. I think sometimes in this environment, it's a campfire where you can go and put logs on the fire with your team. And there's lots of cool little rooms and places to go to have meetings. I really like the system because, as I said, as you move forward or backwards, the volume comes and goes. If you go into a room and shut the door, then no one else in the system hears your conversation. So it kind of mimics a real setting or a real workplace. So if you need to hang out with your team and need to be somewhere, it's a kind of a fun environment. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide and get started here. I don't know, Carrie. Oh, there we go. So why do leaders fail at remote work? I think the first thing, and I bring this up in a lot of my talks, this is, this great work, I always like to talk about, autonomy, mastery, and purpose. I think this is like the baseline. So if we have to give people the autonomy to do their jobs, we have to make sure that they are constantly learning something new, whether that's at work or in their personal lives, but human beings want to be learning, they want to be getting better. And if we have them in a job and a life where they are stagnant all the time, we're setting ourselves up for failure. The autonomy piece really fits into remote work. With anyone who's doing any real amount of remote work, you have to give people a fair bit of autonomy. And I think that's part of the equation. Part of the thing that we don't talk about enough is that great remote workers we have this conversation about what's expected, what we need them to do, and then they go off and go do it and come back with amazing work, or not, but we figure that out. And it's not I'm going to monitor you every moment of the day. And so we're adding a great bit of autonomy, which is really, really great for people to have in their lives. Now, it doesn't mean they get to do whatever they want, right? Autonomy does not mean full freedom. We have this, we set our boundaries, we set our goalposts on what success looks like, but inside of that, giving them that autonomy to do the work. And then the purpose part, right? So why is it we do what we do? Why does this company exist? Not to make money, but what is the grander scheme? What are we trying to do here? In my old company that I sold back in 2021, our purpose used to be to make the world a slightly safer place. And all of my employees could, in their own words, repeat that back, no matter how long they had been with the company. So they kind of understood what our purpose was. And that's super, super important. Next slide. So one of the other reasons I've been seeing a lot of failures by remote work leaders is that they are really confusing hybrid and remote. There has to be a really clear distinction. If you're going to do hybrid, if there's employees that are doing hybrid, if there's employees that are doing fully remote, the best advice I think I heard and that I've been giving out is that if you have people that are hybrid, treat it as remote. If we're all still going to log into that system, we're going to come to Zoom or Ronday or Teams or wherever it is your team goes, everyone should still go there, right? It gets a lot harder when you have 5 people in a conference room and you have 2 people who are dialing in from home that day. It's better off if everyone is logging in and everyone is sort of pretending as if they are remote. That kind of democratizes the environment, democratizes the communication and the experience that everyone is having. So I find a lot of times is that leaders are having these little side conversations with 2 or 3 people who happen to be in the office that day and excluding those people that are outside, and then wondering why communication isn't happening, why we're not getting the message around to people. Next slide. Certainly considering that remote work is one size fits all. And it's not, right? I still see leaders taking that old school pre-COVID, thing of, hey, you have to be in the office from 9 to 5. You have to do these same hours as everybody else. We all take our lunch at the same time or whatever it may be. And remote work is really about providing that opportunity for flexibility, to allow that stay-at-home parent to take their child to school, or to let them go volunteer for an hour or 2 and then just add that time onto the day at the back end, right? Or come in early, to have that flexibility. Now, obviously there are some jobs where that just can't happen, but the more flexibility that we can give them based on what their job is, we see remote work being better, right? We see them being happier, we see productivity being higher. And a great example of this, I don't know if any of you saw that Fortune article that came out recently, and they had that study in there that there was this huge drop in productivity recently, and it really coincides with bringing people back to the office. And so they were far more productive at home, because if the more flexibility we can give them to create that right schedule for them that coincides with the goals of the organization, the better off we can be. We really made a good habit of hiring people who had unique work needs, meaning they needed split shifts, they needed weird hours, they needed to be able to modify their hours on a whim. And in certain departments, that was totally fine. We didn't care if they were all in at the exact same time as everybody else. That worked for us. And so we could take advantage of people who were military spouses and stay-at-home parents and people who maybe had some physical disabilities, and their schedules might be a little bit different. But they were fantastic employees. Those people were so grateful that we were willing to be flexible with them and allow them to make those shifts. They communicated those shifts to us very well, and we made adjustments. And so the eliminating that one size fits all, I think, is super important for us. And that's why a lot of remote leaders fail. Next slide. Next one is they're just not transparent. A lot of information can move around an office in a traditional setting, through the gossip tree, through the allowing people just to stuff to soak around. But when we're remote, we have to be far more intentional about our communication and making sure that we are communicating multiple times in multiple ways, and that key and important information is being delivered to our team. And so being transparent is a big part of that. How much are you allowed to tell your staff? Now, we used to share our profit and loss with everybody. We shared our goals with everybody. We had team leaders show up and share their goals with the entire company and talk about what the progress was. And what we found is the more that we communicated that type of big, sort of macro information, as well as the micro information, afterwards, so they could really look at it and digest it, the better ideas we got. Certainly the more energized they were. They understood the direction we were going and why we were going that way, instead of just, geez, why did we suddenly change direction? Why are we not using this software anymore? Why are we not selling this product anymore? And someone has no clarity around that. And that creates frustration. And it also creates, I notice that when people don't know something, they tend to take the worst possible reason why and fill that in as the reason. So if we don't give them that real reason of why we're doing something and why it's going to happen, then they're going to fill it in with their own stories. And that's far worse than probably anything we might tell them, even if things aren't going well at the company right now, to let them kind of make up their own reality. Next slide. So this is a little bit of a graph to kind of demonstrate. I love to use pictures in my PowerPoints, but this is my one attempt to appeal to anyone super analytical today, to give you a graph. So hi, Troy, thanks for joining us. So basically, when we start in a position where someone doesn't know any information and we ask them to do something, they typically will oppose it, okay? And so as we click through this graph here, you will notice that as we begin to provide them more information, they start to accept the idea. And then as we give them more information and they become highly engaged, they start to really become an advocate for support, right? Now, this graph assumes that this is a good idea. I could say, hey, everyone, let's go start a company where we're going to sell meth in my basement. That's a really bad idea. And so no matter how much information I give them, they should disagree. I certainly hope that they would tell me no and they would oppose that idea. But if it's a good idea, so this is a great test too. If you're giving them all the information, you've provided them deep insight into why we want to do something, and your team is still opposing you, and you're barely getting acceptance, it's probably not a great idea. There's probably something missing here and something you need to really work on with your team. But if you can provide them that deep insight you will get huge buy-in. And for some people, they will love the idea so much, they will understand what you're trying to do to a level that they will become a champion of change. And those are the people, and I'm sure you've all recognized them or you've been them yourselves. They're the person that goes and has their own meetings and is out there being your cheerleader for that idea inside the company without anyone even asking you to do that. And that's the kind of measurable support we need. And that's what transparency brings us by allowing us to really share deeply. And that doesn't happen in one setting and in one meeting. It happens over a period of time. Often, if I had people that were still kind of opposing us, we had most of the people on board, I would often take our most highly engaged and have them go to lunch or have them get on a meeting or have them go do something with those people who were the most opposed to it and have them just go have a conversation away from everyone else, away from their manager. And one of two things would happen. Either we would discover there was an issue, something we had not addressed, which was super important, or we allowed that champion of change to really work through the fears with that person and get them into acceptance or even into engagement level. So just if you think about transparency in how we can help move people along to be more supportive for us, it's a great way for leaders to be successful. Okay, next slide. Now, here are the things that I find that remote leaders tend to forget. And this might apply to all leaders, but I think it's a good reminder. And so as we go through this list here, the first one is they want us to be brave. Right? They don't want us to be hiding from things and avoiding things. They certainly want us to be, we can go a couple down this list so I can see where I'm going. They want us to be inspiring. They want us to bring that. I used to send a quote of the day to my team. It was a really simple thing I could do, just send them a quote. That was me just trying to inspire them every morning. And I was shocked at how many times people would write back and say, wow, I really needed this today. I feel like you sent this quote just for me. The honest truth was I went and picked some random quote on Brainy quote that day, but it was something somebody needed. They want us to be upfront with them. They want us to be compassionate, to be open. They want us to be okay with dissent. That's a really, really big one. How are you showing your team that you value them disagreeing with you, you value them disagreeing with the team and not going along with everybody? How do you show them that? How do you communicate that? It's really, really a big deal. I mean, I would have people disagree, we would have a hard meeting, and I would make sure at the end of the meeting to say, I really want to call out whoever that person was for being brave enough to tell us that they didn't agree, that they dissented on what we were saying. And I appreciate that, and I want everyone else to feel comfortable doing that. And so we would bring that up, we would talk about that on a regular basis when it happened. They certainly want us to be their leader, not their friend. It's nice if you can be their friend as well, if that works out, but they want us to be their leader first. It's sort of that, what was that Death of a Salesman quote? That better to be respected than to be liked, right? The character in that play preferred to be liked, and of course he ended up with no one. So we also want to be clear. We want to be rigid about the big stuff. So I want to talk about this for a second. I have seen so many leaders fail where they make a big deal and take a big stand about little things that don't matter. And then when it comes to the big stuff, they don't make decisions. They can't stand up for their team, right? They need you to be their hero when it comes to the big stuff, the things that really matter for them. And the little stuff, it's okay to be flexible and to be different from person to person and to make adjustments as we go. The small stuff is the small stuff. Okay, next slide. Now, they've also forgotten about how meetings might be killing us, might be overloading us. This is from a Microsoft study where they looked at people who were on meetings back to back to back versus people who were on meetings that had breaks. And on the left, you can see their brain activity. The more red it is, the worse off they are, the more foggy they are, the harder time they have concentrating, the more likely they are to not remember some of the important details from that meeting. And on the right are people who had some breaks. So leaders need to make sure that people are not stuck on back-to-back meetings. They should not be on back-to-back meetings. We need to intentionally build in times for breaks, times to think, to get caught up, to really digest what we just talked about, right? Think about all that. We say, hey, I'll do that thing for you. And yeah, I'm going to get you that report. And let me think about how we can fix that problem. And then we don't give people time to actually go think and do those things. So it's super important that leaders are ensuring and talking to their people about breaks. And I don't mean breaks from work, but breaks from meetings specifically here for this slide. We're talking about having time in between meetings to really think and digest. Next slide. So when we are thinking about meetings, I often, people talk about, should that have been an email? That's always a good one. Could we have had done a Slack message instead of a meeting? Sure. But if we're going to have a meeting, we definitely want to make sure that we have the right people at the right time. And if you feel like the people that are invited to that meeting are the right people, and this is the right time to have that call, to have that thing, then great, then do it. And if the answer is no, if it's not the right, if some of the people you've invited to that maybe aren't the right people, then don't have them come, right? Excuse them, send them a recording of the call, right, to give them that space. And if it's not the right time, then wait. Now, speaking of the right time, I love to do this exercise called bonding. And this is certainly something all of you can go back and do with your teams right now. We used to do this up to once a day. It could be done once a week. It could be done a few times a month. But this is how you can connect as a leader to your team in a really meaningful way. So the first thing you need to do is when the meeting starts is to ask everyone, how are you showing up? Not how are you doing? How's it going? No, how are you showing up? Over time, the more you do this, people will start to really come with great answers. It could be, I'm feeling great. I closed the deal yesterday, or I really helped that client. I'm having a great day. I just got back from vacation. It could be great things. It could also be, I just found out my grandmother passed away, or we are trying to train a new puppy. I haven't slept in 3 days, or I have my in-laws are visiting. I feel like I'm going to go crazy. The house has been chaotic for an entire week. They might tell you all kinds of things. And what we find is if they are struggling, and you're seeing that multiple members of your team are struggling, maybe this is not the right time to have that meeting. Maybe we need to stop and deal with those things they're telling you. Or if it's just one person, can that person be excused? Hey, Sally, I'm really sorry. I heard that your grandmother passed away. Do you want to skip this meeting? We can send you the notes. We can send you, why don't you go and take some time? If you're not feeling it, it's okay. That kind of emotional intelligence, that kind of empathy is huge. That you're telling them, hey, go take care of yourself. We can get you caught up later. Now, at the end of the meeting, we go around and say, how are you leaving? So I find that people tend to, when you ask how you're showing up, it's like me as the full person, employee, father, brother, whatever. It's me in my whole life. But when we say, how are you leaving? I find that answer as the employee specifically. And they might say, this is a great meeting. Or they might say, I don't think this is going to work. I know we talked about this, but I don't think the client's going to go for it. I'm really worried about what the client's going to say. Or I know you all want to do this, but I think IT is going to tell us no. Like suddenly you get this feedback. And I can tell you, I've had many meetings where I went, did I have the same meeting they had? I mean, I've had both where I thought it was a great meeting and they didn't, or I thought it was a terrible meeting and they were all mad and they were happy just to have a decision. So I was really blown away by the kind of information I would get by just asking them how they're leaving. Now, most importantly, as you do this, the most senior people must go last. If you, the thing is, we want to like demonstrate this and we go, hey, how's everyone showing up? I'll go first because I'm your leader. I'll show you how it's done. And then you show up and say, I'm fantastic. The world is great. I just got a raise, got my new BMW, blah, blah. And they're like, they're checked out. I don't care, dude. Like, no. So instead, we want them to go around and share first. And if they are struggling, guess what? They don't give a crap about how you're doing. They need you to help them with whatever's going on in their life. And you don't get to share today if you're their leader. If everyone in that group or most people in that group are struggling, you got to deal with that and keep the rest to yourself and help them. If everyone else is great and then you're struggling and you want to share with your team, that's a great moment to really do that and to be a little bit vulnerable. But those come few and far between. So make sure you go last for both of them. Okay. We go click here. What do we got? Oh, I see it. There we go. Okay, so a few last things that I think are important. The less one-on-one meetings you can have, the better. I think it's very difficult for remote leaders to be effective if all they're doing is running around having one-on-one meetings all the time. They should be more team-based. Save your one-on-one meetings for super confidential, super, crazy stuff, maybe special training, things like that. But the more we can have those conversations in the group setting, now you may feel like you have to have those coaching sessions with them occasionally or on a regular basis. That's fine. I personally don't like that, but if you feel like you need that, great. But don't be having tons of one-on-ones all the time just to get work done, right? The more you can save that and be more collaborative in the team event, the more effective we find that leaders will be. Stop having long video meetings, try to cut them up. If you can have 15-minute meetings, 30-minute meetings, everything shouldn't be an hour. And of course, we want to curate great meetings. I'm sure you all know these rules, but start on time, always try to end early. And if there's no agenda, there's no meeting. If people don't know why they're there in advance, they will disappoint you by not being prepared. You will be frustrated that they didn't come with the answers that you wanted because they didn't know they were supposed to, because they didn't have that agenda. You knew what you were meeting about. You knew what they were supposed to talk about, but they didn't. So if you don't have an agenda, you're not communicating that, you shouldn't be having a meeting. Okay, next slide. And then create some signposts. In regular companies and in an office, we know when we check in, we know when we do things, we know when we collaborate. It's a little bit easier to know when that happens because, hey, everyone, come in the conference room, or hey, we're going to buy pizza for everybody. There's these natural things. We drive into work, we know it's time to start. We leave work, we know it's time, we drive out of work or we get on the train, we know it's time to stop work. Those things aren't as obvious in remote work. So the more we can tell and design when we're going to brainstorm or when we're going to blow off steam, when we're going to come together to do that, or whatever it is you feel like it's important for your team to do, whenever you design that, however you design that, it has to be more intentional than it was when you were all sitting in a cubicle farm. Okay, next slide. All right, my last little story here is, I think, why leaders fail is they tend to focus on the wrong thing. I love the story. Google's X has this, big vision of doing really giant things that can have a huge change to the world. And they have this test called the monkey or the pedestal. And that test, in when they decide how to work on something or whether or not they should move forward, is, so the idea here is, the monkey and the pedestal is, if you have to train a monkey to recite Shakespeare on a pedestal, right? What's the hardest thing to do? Well, the hardest thing is to try to get a monkey to recite Shakespeare, right? That's really hard. That might be impossible, right? And yet, what leaders tend to do is they will go and start making pedestals. They'll do the easy thing. Well, we know we can make pedestals. Let's go start making those while somebody else figures out how to make the monkey recite Shakespeare. And so Google X's test is, if we can't figure the big thing out, if we can't get that monkey to recite Shakespeare, there is absolutely no reason for us to spend any time and effort making pedestals. And I see time and time again that leaders will want their teams to be busy, or they want to show some improvement or progress in some area, and we start spending time on things that may not ever come to fruition, may not ever be valuable, may not ever be good, because the larger issue never gets figured out. So if you feel like your team is working on a project where there's something that's maybe not going to get done, maybe not ever going to happen, then we can't be working on the small little busy work, right? So helping teams understand that. In Scrum and Agile, we call that the product owner, somebody who has the list of things that we're going to do, and it's their job to make sure that we have the right priority, we're going to work on the right things, and we don't spend wasted effort and time on small things, or things that aren't going to matter, or things that are happening in the wrong order. It's super important. So focusing on those big work tasks is the last part of it. I think that's the last thing. There may be one more slide here. Oh yeah, if anyone wants to follow me on TikTok or Instagram, there's my things. And maybe the last slide is our Q&A one, I think. So does anyone have any questions or thoughts? I saw a few laughs and thumbs up, and I saw a few heads shaking no sometimes. So I'm happy to, if anyone has any comments or questions, we can dive into that. Oh, no questions. Oh, that might be a first. Clark?
No, I was just putting on the video again, not to be
Okay,
distracted
great.
or distracting. No, I thought you had some really, really good points. I just came in after a webinar with a colleague, actually, who gave a brilliant talk about why go to the office and collaborating, and what managers need to know, that collaboration, true collaboration, is out of the box thinking. I thought that was a new angle, and I was looking for traces of that. I think we are challenged to have virtual forums where we can create that true kind of collaboration. And maybe a platform like this could help.
Sure. Hey, Troy, I see your mic's up. Do you have a question?
Oh, I know. I appreciate putting the Insta back up for the QRs.
Okay.
Is this whose technology is this? This is an interesting. It's my first time in this technology.
Yeah, this is Ronday. So when we're done, you can walk around. There's some boards up. They have some different things you can explore about the technology. You can, meet with teams and meet in rooms. They have some cool areas to blow off steam. You can, shoot. You can watch a video together, or you can put a presentation up on these walls. So it's kind of cool.
Okay.
Happy to, if you're interested, if you want to demo with someone, I'm sure we can work.
I think a lot of people like me kind of wandered in a bit late. I'm out of place myself, not where I thought it was going to be today. Can you? I know who Ronday is. It was a great presentation. Can you kind of go over the first couple of minutes where you're introducing yourself again? So a lot of us kind of came in late and didn't get. I honestly don't know how I got into this. Right, it showed up on my calendar. My assistant put it on here for me, or something like that. So it was a great. Yeah. It was a great talk. It was really interesting. I liked the thing about the signposts. Right.
Yeah.
I'm always trying to figure out how to get people connected. I didn't know how to conceptualize it. And that concept of signpost is like, well, that kind of comes together really well. Like that.
Yeah.
Part. Yeah.
Yeah. We just schedule. This is the time. This is the meeting where we're going to brainstorm. This is the meeting where we're going to have, beer Friday at 4:00 or whatever. I mean, we had to just be super curated about it. We couldn't just leave it to chance. Whereas those things might happen by chance in an office, just because a group of people might want to do that. Right, or they might want to go have a beer after work. We had to be more intentional. So I didn't really do a super big introduction because I thought everyone who came in was connected to me on LinkedIn. But yeah, I'm Chris Dyer. I've written a couple books, one called The Power of Company Culture. One is about remote work. My organization was fully remote as of 2009, and I had 4,500 employees and independent contractors that I managed completely remotely. And then I sold that company at the end of 2021. So I spend my time now consulting and helping people with remote work, with culture, with scaling their businesses. And Ronday asked me to come in today to do a little webinar for him.
I appreciate that. And the remote work thing is just so fascinating. I did like a 10-year remote thing through biotech before COVID. And then when COVID came, it felt like to me it completely messed up remote work because it changed the expectations to be on video and how people behaved. And it was like, no, we had this worked out with the phones before and it worked out really well. Right. I feel like the whole COVID thing kind of really monkeyed with a lot of things that were working well in kind of remote work and how it's put together. So yeah, I appreciate the talk on it.
Yeah, I remember those conference calls, just dialing into freeconferencecall.com or whatever. Yeah. But we have seen when we're using video in the right way, there is a part of our brain. They say that seeing someone smile releases the same amount of endorphins as winning $10,000. I don't know if that's true. I feel like I would be a little bit happier about winning $10,000, but that's, they say it's somewhat similar about seeing that smile. And so we can feel lonely if we don't see our team, if we don't see smiles and we don't connect. But I am against having video on all the time, 100%, like forcing people.
Microsoft study, right, is kind of what you're showing. There's a really interesting U.S. Army study that kind of comes to the same conclusion in a different way. And what the Army study is discovering is they're having a lot of trouble getting the people that went through the last few years of school in COVID to be able to pass the entrance exams to the Army. And what they discovered is because those kids that did that really didn't learn very much. And it's not the kid's fault, and it's not the teacher's fault, but everything went to, like, the kindergartner was on video for 9 hours a day.
Yeah.
And we never did that before. And now we know that's a horrible way to teach people. And it's a horrible way to work. But that's what COVID did. It came in and messed up remote work and turned it into this, like, just overload.
And they just didn't have the tools, either. I mean, probably we could do remote learning even better now, but back when that happened, they were so unprepared. There was like blocks of like time when they just were babysitting them basically until they could figure it out.
That's what remote work turned into too. All of a sudden my camera was on for 15 hours a day.
Yeah. Do we have a question in the back? I see a hand up with a question.
Yeah, it's Carrie. I just wanted to lift up a question that was in the chat from Mia. She asked, are there any meeting icebreaker ideas that you have to get the energy up at the start of meetings?
So again, I'm a big advocate of doing the bonding over actual icebreakers. But if you feel like you need to get people excited, like if there's an energy thing, I always like to let somebody else on the team lead that. To let them, let someone on the team bring creativity or to bring an idea and let them do something. I feel like it's a burden, and it gets to be a bit problematic when it's constantly the leader showing up trying to rah everybody. And so if we can allow the team an opportunity, maybe that's one person sharing a great thing that happened. Maybe that's something great that happened to them, at work. Maybe that's just one person showing up and telling us more about them, right? Just to kind of break that. And I'm always about increasing connection versus trying to temporarily lift their mood for just so we can have a happier meeting. I feel like that's kind of disingenuous to them. I'm always like, hey, where are you guys at right now, and how can I help you, and how the heck do we get off this meeting as quickly as possible so that you can get your work done? I mean, that's always been my driving thing. There are those meetings where, they really do want to talk, or they do really want to commiserate, but I guess I've been a little bit less like, hey, let's rah everybody, and then they may not really be ready for that, or they don't want to do that. But I always tend to outsource that to someone who was that person who liked taking that on, and if they like to show up and help us do that, then I could kind of create more of an opportunity for someone else to shine. But I bet you if you Google top icebreakers for remote meetings, I'm sure there's probably some really good ideas that I just wasn't my thing. Anything else? Well, cool. Like I said, feel free to use your arrow keys there and walk around and go see the space before you pop out of here. I think you'll like some of the areas you'll see. And I know we'll be doing some more of these, so certainly hope you all can join us again. All right.
Chris,
thanks, Chris.
If you want to applaud,
Thanks,
you can
everyone.
hit the 6 key, 6 and 7. Show a little love.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. Right on.
Thank you.